Welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, the podcast that makes time and space to think about pedagogy, teaching and learning, professional development, anything of interest to time-poor but enthusiastic primary teachers. Join us as we delve into the murky depths of education in an attempt to help you enhance your classroom practice. In today's episode, I, Neil Almond, will be taking the reins.
Welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, the podcast that makes time and space to think about pedagogy, teaching and learning, professional development, anything of interest to time-poor but enthusiasm-rich primary teachers. This week, I'm joined by Neil Almond.
Good to be back, Kieran.
This week, we're going to explore the potential of artificial intelligence and the impact it might have on the work of teachers. But first, Neil, what you reading for?
Hey, what you reading for?
So I was recommended a book called Spelling, Structure and Strategies by Paul and Jean Hanna and Richard Hodges. It's quite an old book, 1971, so it's that getting on just over 50 years old now. Quite enjoyable in the sense that it's affirming many of the biases that I have into how I think we should teach spelling, which on one hand is really good and on another hand, not so great. What was interesting about this one, though, is that they were kind of the first people. There was a study, and I had no idea about this. They did a study in the 60s and, used all the computing power that, we had back in the 60s, which obviously was enough to put a man on the moon. So fair amount of it. To really kind of study the structure of the English language. And so they're kind of, the main appeal for this book for me was around that structure element, because they've kind of, in a very basic way, it would have to be updated for the modern era. It kind of revealed the statistical properties of the English language. So you could teach children to a high degree percentage that if this sound, if the sound ow was in the end position, then there was I'm making this statistic up, something like a 95% chance that it's spelt OW. And that's kind of something that has always kind of interested me and is something that I felt has been missing from spelling instruction, that kind of making that statistical element explicit to students as quickly as possible. So yeah, haven't finished it yet, but really enjoyed kind of going through it, and kind of gives me hope that there'll be some researchers out there who will create a larger corpus than the 17,000 words I think that they used when they did this. Ideally, hopefully British English spelling as well, and obviously with more computing power, stronger algorithms, we'll be able to produce something more up to date. So we'll see. What about you? What are you reading for?
Nice. Just the 50 years have passed. Yeah, so I mean, it might be implemented in classrooms any day now. I've got a maths one for balance. It was shared with me, I think, Brendan Lee shared it. It's called The Need for Speed, Why Fluency Counts for Maths Learning by Tony Hatton-Robb. Very interesting read. I won't give away too many spoilers, but I'm sure you can probably guess what the sort of the main takeaways are. But well worth checking out. So I think probably, Neil, it was around about this time last year that you introduced me to OpenAI, and in those 12 months, a lot has happened. The rest of the world has tried to catch up with you. So obviously you're trailblazer in terms of artificial intelligence. So I thought we'd sit down and we'd look at what this might mean for teachers, because there are plenty of snake oil merchants who are looking to make a fast buck off the back of this. And
I promise I'm not one of them.
Well, no, you've no skin in the game.
Yeah.
And the charlatans aren't they're not teachers, so I'm not commenting on any educators here in this operating in this field, but rather you can see the promoted tweets on Twitter and stuff like that there, where it's like I'm sure people have seen them, so like reskinning ChatGTP. I don't know. Am I offending any
Yeah,
teachers?
No, you're fine. I say it's 80% of my Twitter feed now is just these promoted accounts that are telling me that I could earn thousands of dollars in side hustles if I just learned how to do these 5 things in Chat GPT or Dolly or Midjourney. And yeah, it's a pain for my Twitter feed. Let's put it that way.
So I thought we'd explore it because there must be some value, because there's a whole lot of money being invested in this around the world. But it makes sense to start with definitions of what we're talking about. What is artificial intelligence?
Okay, so AI kind of, for me, it's the study of using data in ridiculously large quantities to attempt to program intelligent machines that mimic human-like behavior. That's my the definition that I'm kind of going for here. Obviously, the purpose of it, I guess, is to improve how quickly, accurately, and successfully it can complete tasks that we may ask, humans to do. Right now, we're kind of seeing the beginnings of that sort of journey and attempt to mixed success, I think is fair to say.
I mean, when I think of artificial intelligence, I think of, was it Deep Blue? The chess playing robot?
Yeah.
That taught itself essentially through running through millions and millions of different games how to play chess to the point where it was unbeatable. Was it Deep Blue? I mean, I know they put deep in front of.
They put deep in front of everything. The reason it's called Deep Blue is that particular sort of. So AI is like a bit of like a good like umbrella term for lots of other kind of other techniques that are AI, but there is definitely a sort of like hierarchy to them. So AI is sort of the holding concept, the overall sort of umbrella, and then you kind of have things like machine learning, which is a method of making predictions with that doesn't sort of use predetermined human coded rules, and that kind of analyzes vast volumes of data to find patterns, then kind of construct a model. So that's kind of your large language model-esque type of ideas. You also then have, as you kind of mentioned there, this kind of deep, and that's kind of like this deep learning. And what they try to do with deep learning is that, again, it's a subset of AI where they are literally trying to kind of feed and create this kind of neural network that, effectively learns by itself. And so that's where that chess element comes from. So anything that kind of has deep blue, deep mind, anything like that is kind of using this kind of deep learning kind of process that uses artificial neural networks to try and get it to comprehend and understand and attempt to reason, but not always very well, what they should and shouldn't be doing at various points, which is why I say they can analyze all that data and make those predictions, because that's all they are. And that's a kind of really important thing to remember when we're talking about AI, particularly sort of generative AI, is that it's just a massive prediction machine, and that has massive ramifications for how you should treat the kind of information that it, the outputs that it then provides you, because they're not necessarily searching the internet for accurate information. Everything that it creates is new in the sense that it hasn't necessarily been written and copyrighted previously. So, but it can sound really convincing in the terms of what you want it to give, which can make it seem like, oh, well, you must have picked this up from the internet, or, I've asked you for paragraph 3, chapter 4 and more, and War and Peace. And I want you to summarize that. And then it kind of gives a really, what you would assume, accurate-ish, well, not necessarily accurate, plausible idea what that actually could be, where in actual fact, it sounds like it could be summarizing it, but the reality is that it's just made something completely up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important distinction there. Yeah, because I was almost conflating machine learning with artificial intelligence. That's not quite the case.
No, machine learning is a subset of AI. It's a type of AI, but it's not the same thing. And machine learning has been around for ages on our phone. Machine learning is the kind of stuff that, like, I don't know if you're probably, far much more of a life than I do, but I like making sure that if I take photos of people, that my phone like tells me who those people are. So if I wanted to find all the photos that I've had of you that are in my phone, I could just search for Kieran Mackle and it would kind of show me all the photos that it thinks is you. Now you kind of start training that model, then eventually it kind of gets to learn who you are. And so, every now and then it just pops up saying, hey, here's, 5 new photos of you and Kieran Mackle. That's kind of like machine learning. That's it, kind of learning from that data that you kind of feed it to kind of get to know you. And so the phone, well, iPhones, I'm sure Google are doing the same as well. That kind of feature's been there for ages. So it's like, yeah, machine learning, nothing kind of new. It's not something that's just brand new to market as such. The newish side of it is this idea of it being these generative AI tools, this idea of you can prompt it with various things and then it kind of gives you an output, which could either be a text output or an image output, depending on which AI tool you are choosing to use.
My phone does that. Sometimes it does it for me, or it feels like it's done it for me. I've actually been training mine to identify me as someone else in case I ever need to be extracted. And then they'll have my records and go, who's this guy? Is artificial intelligence likely to change the way teachers work?
I don't know if this will be a surprising answer or not, but I actually don't think it's going to necessarily fundamentally change the way that we work. I think it's just going to support teachers in how they do the work that they currently need to do. I don't think, for a whole myriad of reasons, that we're going to automate a lot of the things that we would like to automate from a data GDPR perspective, from a cost perspective. I don't think it's kind of with anywhere near that yet. But what I do think it will do is kind of be the sort of digital teaching assistant to the teacher. I can't say teaching assistant, otherwise we might get confused what we mean. So it's definitely assistant to the teacher. I kind of think the way that the best way that's going to kind of help is if we think about the Pareto principle. So 20% of the efforts deliver 80% of the results. Like the hardest place to start is obviously that first 20% of that 20%. Like when you're there with like a blank sheet of paper because you have to fill in a form, or you have to sort of write a risk assessment for a trip, or plan a lesson, and you're just there with that kind of blank sheet of paper for ideas. That first 20% of that 20% is really hard. And I kind of think that what generative AI can kind of really help us with is to kind of provide that launching point to kind of help us with that first 20% of the 20% that delivers the 80% of the output, if that makes sense, which is the hardest part. But just by giving us that kind of launch pad, get those ideas flowing, I think it's going to be really, quite useful in that regard to teachers, because I say it kind of gives them that first, could be that first step, or just a couple of ideas that could be what they need to then get into a state of flow so that they can kind of finish off whatever task and activity that they need to do. So yeah, I don't think it's going to massively change what teachers do, but I think it will change sort of how teachers are going to do it, particularly I think with things like, and again, depends on budgets and data protection and things like that. But Google services, they're starting to integrate Bard, which is Google's large language model. Microsoft has Copilot, which is their large language model, and all of these, and this kind of assistant, for want of a better word, can talk to your Office app. So Copilot can talk to Outlook, Word, PowerPoint, OneNote, whatever it may be. Bard, the same for the Google equivalent. And so what it would really do is kind of really support teachers bringing all the information that currently sits separately within those individual applications and bring them together, and being able to kind of compile that information together and, you know, produce some sort of output. So you might have, for example, teacher planning let's stick with planning a school trip. So she might want to ask Copilot, I want you to bring up or kind of show me everything that I've done so far to support the school trip to the Tower of London. And so the email that she sent to SLT asking for the trip would come up automatically. The Word document that she put together for the letter would come up. The PowerPoint presentation that she's done for the parents to explain the purpose of the trip and, you know, how they can support and all of that stuff will come up. And obviously then you can kind of, you know, combine all of that data that's in those particular documents, you know, to potentially then create something, you know, quite powerful. And so I do feel that side of it, that sort of digital admin assistant, you know, that could actually probably, you know, again, not change the way teachers work, but change how teachers need to do the work that they need to do. However, as I mentioned previously, there's the whole thing about, well, how much is this going to cost schools extra? And obviously, as we're talking about, you know, young children here, you know, you need to give Copilot access to effectively your Microsoft account. And so if you are a complete Microsoft school, that is all the data that you may hold on children and whatever else within those different applications. Those then need to go off to a Microsoft server for, you know, Copilot to do the things that it needs to do. And obviously, you know, there are massive implications then if anything, you know, does go awry. But that is definitely, I think, one way that I think will save teachers time from that kind of admin side of it, and that kind of aggregation of all this data that teachers accumulate. Or maybe it's just me and I just accumulate lots of emails about different things, and, you know, my filing system of organizing things has never been, you know, as I would like it to be. I'm no Adam Smith with his Notion and things like that. But, you know, I think it could help teachers with that regard. And I think that's not the reason teachers come into school. So anything that helps them to that side of it, which means that they can focus more on their teaching. I don't want to go as far as saying that there's probably like a moral reason there that schools should be looking into this, because by going down that avenue, they're opening up more kind of ethical issues. But I definitely think exploring such avenues, particularly in this current climate, is something that, you know, schools, large trusts, the DFE should be considering.
I think it sounds really interesting. I would love that as a teacher, to have something that would help me structure my personal organization. A lot of the early conversations about artificial intelligence seemed to allude to the outsourcing of thinking. And obviously, the main theme of the podcast is that thinking is the most important thing teachers can do. Are you saying that there's no way that artificial intelligence will ever take the thinking out of teaching? You know, and you know, hey, Bard, I want a lesson plan on, I don't know, rock and Romans. Is that day ever going to come?
Yeah, that day will come, but I don't necessarily classify that as the AI doing the thinking for you. as I say, you know, I would be amazed if anyone takes that, you know, puts that into a generative AI tool and, you know, doesn't then do anything with it. As I say, you know, it starts off the thinking process. It gives you some ideas to think about, but, you know, fundamentally, you know, you then have to think with that information. Again, the first port of call, and it kind of comes back to something that we'll discuss later on, is, you know, you have to check for the accuracy. If you're using a large language model to do this, you know, you have to check for the accuracy. So my preferred way of doing it would be that you have, you know, quite a tight curriculum in the terms of you're quite explicit as to what you want students to know. So let's say, keeping on the theme of rocking Romans, so, you know, Caesar tried to invade in 55, he tried again in 54, and he failed because I think the weather was particularly bad, something like that, in one of the invasions, and the Celtic tribes were able to kind of have a bit of a ceasefire between themselves to come together to defend the Romans. Let's say that's what you wanted out of that first lesson. If you told the AI that, you know, these are the parameters of my lesson, this is what I want kids to know. I want them to know that, you know, Julius Caesar invaded 55, then 54, and then it failed. One of the reasons why the 54 invasion failed, or two reasons why the 54 invasion failed, was because the weather was against him, so he had to invade later than he originally planned, and the Celtic tribes of Britain at the time, you know, came together to, you know, stand against him. Make me a lesson plan from that is going to be far more beneficial, far more effective, far more accurate, because you, the teacher, are kind of, you know, narrowing those parameters for which this predictive model is going to be working from. So the output that it gives you is going to be far more accurate to what you need, versus something like, hi, ChatGPT, I'm teaching a lesson on the Romans. It's for year 3. You know, hit the button, go, because, you know, that's just going to deliver all sorts of weird and wonderful things with potential inaccuracies. So the more thinking that you do actually before you ask what you want, the more useful that output is going to be, and sort of a big, and that's kind of partly the reason why I've gone down this kind of like this prompt avenue, because I kind of really want to make people aware that this AI tools and technology can be really effective, but it really is sort of that intersection between teacher expertise and your knowledge of how to provide a really useful prompt. It's not an outsourcing of teacher expertise, far from it. Now, will we ever get there, though? I mean, you know, who knows? But right now, we can't, we shouldn't.
I was listening to a podcast, and it was from a totally different field, but they were talking about AI, and they were saying that between now and April next year, there's going to be a massive explosion. You know, if we think about what the explosion that happened last October when the world became aware of this large language model, and then the 12 things that have happened in 12 months since then, they think this next, 6 months will be massive. So who knows what will be possible. But I really like the idea that it's going to take a lot of expertise in 2 domains now to actually get the most from it. And you can't just type in, I'm teaching fractions, off you go. You know, there's my fractions plan. You know, that gives me some reassurance.
We're recording this on Monday, the 30th of October, 2023. You know, this is probably going to be out of date before even, I don't know when you're planning on putting this one out there, but I would go likely before this gets put out to listeners, and elements of what I've said are probably going to be out of date already, which just goes to show how fast moving this field really is.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned prompts. So you're alluding to the newsletter that you have started to release?
So myself, past participant on the show, Peps McRae, who I'm sure people will know from all his concise books, which make me think that perhaps they were mostly written by AI. I'm not sure yet. I haven't had the guts to ask him yet whether he was actually just using large language models to write most of those, but I'm sure I'll ask him at some point. We kind of had this idea of putting this out there to help teachers navigate the murky waters of these generative AI tools that are out there. I would say we alluded to earlier the kind of Twitter bots that are appearing here, there, and everywhere, and other kind of various other AI tools that are marketed towards people using, and seeing if we can provide a different avenue of support, which I say it's predominantly through this idea of prompting, which is where most of these generative AI tools like ChatGPT and Dolly, Midjourney, whatever they may be, predominantly require on a text input, and that's called your prompt. And effectively, this entire sort of field has arisen recently called prompt engineering, which is effectively, I'm really starting to not like the term, but I'll use it because I can't think of another one. But it's effectively the science of how do we create effective prompts to make sure that the output that we then get from this generative AI model is what we envision that prompt to be. So as I said, these are effectively prediction machines. So if we are really vague, you say, I want a lesson plan on the Romans, you might well get a lesson plan back that includes things like, this is how you should support different learning styles, for example, which evidently, we know is not a good use of our time, but clearly within the trained data set, it has information about learning styles. And so because we were quite vague with our prompt, we it gave us back something. So the more we can kind of find the underlying structures and play around with those underlying structures of what effective prompting is, the higher quality the output, effectively, and hopefully the more useful that it then is for teachers to use in upcoming lessons or admin, for example. And so, yes, one of the ways that we started this process is through our weekly newsletter, Teacher Prompts, which is there to kind of upskill teachers, not just in sort of prompts, although we try to make sure that it does do that. It's kind of there just to give predominantly, educators, up-to-date news in the AI world, that sort of, where possible, sort of directly influences education. So, for example, 2 bits of news that will probably make it to tomorrow's newsletter is that the government's just recently handed over Oak 2 million to explore AI use there. I've had a bit of a play with some of these tools already, and they need work, but I'm sure the more this is in front of teachers, the more useful it's going to be. And you can now upload, if you purchase ChatGPT Plus to access the GPT-4 model, which is has more parameters, is trained on more data, is more accurate. You can sort of now drop PDFs and other kind of files into it, and it can then summarize, and you can ask questions and interrogate it about that particular file that you've dropped in, etc., etc. So, and then we go in about what effective, some effective prompts that will be useful for teachers.
Yeah, so every week, and I like that you always have in this I don't know edition, in this it's not episode,
mm-hmm.
you will find, and then you get like a couple of links, and then you've got this image.
Yeah, always try to throw in a generative AI image there, just to they're quite good. I mean, we had some good fun making some the other day, didn't we, in our little group chat of the weird and wonderful things that you could do with that. I really enjoyed the Up sequel.
Yeah,
Down. But it was funny because you could immediately get that sense that this was Up, that this was, it was all themed on the idea of Up. And I'm not going to say what's holding me back from creating high quality educational resources has been my poor graphic design ability, but I'm far more inclined to give it a go now that I know I can just prompt Dolly to give me a few useful images to use. So yeah, it's going to be useful.
Yeah, I mean, it does take some prompting because I gave it some lazy prompts and got some nonsense back. My best one were the Beatles, but they're a band called the Beatles, but they're actually Beatles. And then Dishwasher Has Fallen.
Dishwasher Has Fallen. It was a great one. Maybe we'll put these when the episode goes out. We'll find them and people can have a
link. Yeah, good shout. Yeah, I think it saves them. What were we using? We were using Bard's image generator. Is that what it's called?
We were using Bing.
Bing, not Bard. Yeah, Bard is Google. Bing is Microsoft.
Yeah,
that's that search engine no one uses.
Exactly.
So technology and education have a very interesting relationship. Sometimes millions of pounds can be spent in ways that were perhaps ill-advised. What are the chances that this AI revolution is smoke and mirrors, like those other aspects of technology that have proven not to be as effective in changing our practice or our ways of working?
I mean, there's always the chance, isn't there? We've seen it with, interactive whiteboards were not the solution that we were sold they would be. One-to-one devices and iPads certainly haven't been the thing that they've done. But the reason I feel like this is different, one, because you don't necessarily need, obviously there's a continuum here. If you were to go, as I mentioned, the whole virtual admin assistant via Bard or Copilot, and that's something that your school purchased as part of the Microsoft license, then yes, obviously there is a likely to be an additional cost to that. But you can get in there, without price being a barrier. ChatGPT 3.5 is free to use. Bing is free to use as well. All you have to do is just make accounts for these things. And I feel as well, the one-to-one iPads or one-to-one devices, the interactive whiteboards, all of that stuff, that was very much student-facing uses of technology. This sort of generative AI stuff, yes, you might put resources that you've created through this in front of the pupils, but it is very much all happening sort of, in the background, backstage, as you were. It's the planning processes, it's that deep thinking that we're doing before we get in front of the classroom. And because of that element, I think it will be different. I think because, the irony is, I'm no fan of Sunak, as you know, but I think we all laughed a couple of years ago when he said he was going to plow a bit of money into AI, and we all sort of laughed at him. But I think credit where credit is due. He was potentially right in that this is something that is going to really potentially support teachers, and I think with their putting their money where their mouth is to a degree by giving, Oak National some funding to kind of explore this, and Oak National are putting all their tools out there, which is good and interesting. So, teachers are going to, see this. I'm sure there are teachers who still don't know how to access these things and that these things exist, absolutely. But those teachers that know about interactive whiteboards, those teachers that know about large language models and generative AI, I bet they've played more with generative AI and what that can do for them than they ever did about, let's have a look and see what smart can do. They found infinite cloner and thought, great, this is my job done, and I don't need anything else. So yeah, this feels kind of different because price isn't necessarily a barrier to access. There are free versions that you can use, and because it's not happening in the classroom, it's happening in that kind of planning stage. I think that there's more scope for this to be successful than previous elements of technology. But again, all it would take is one massive data breach, then the whole house of cards to come crumbling down somehow. So yeah, got to be careful with it. I think it has more chance than previous tech endeavors, but as I say, it's certainly not infallible by any means.
If it's used in the way that you describe, it could be used. I think there's a fairly good chance that it could be. There is, I think I mentioned this, I can't remember which episode it was. There is quite a large, I think it's a charity organization that's involved in the education of other people, and their investment in AI has been trying to get the computer or the program to give feedback on misconceptions and things like that there. It feels like that's the kind of thing, you would need a whole lot of information to make an accurate prediction about what the misconception was or why the error had formed. Do you reckon is that indicative of how people in, Silicon Valley at the minute, maybe a little bit further beyond, are funneling their investment in education and AI? Or do you think it is as sort of an assistant to the regional manager?
It's a good question. One I haven't really thought about. I would say the former, purely on no data or any smart hypothesis behind it, other than in Silicon Valley, data is king. There's that running joke where if you don't pay for a service, you are the product, which is why I always pay for Apple and try to avoid Google wherever possible. That's my biases coming in there. And so the more data you have, the more valuable data is, the more it can be used to target at specific things. And we've got no idea how advertisers are somehow going to find their mitts into all of this data and do stuff with it to try to target more ads at you in a more kind of specific fashion. But it's evidently, in the past, it's paid off having as much data about as many people as you can, so you can sort of generate, rough profiles on who these people are, what they're likely to be into, who they're likely to vote for, and, all that sort of real semi-conspiracy Cambridge Analytica sort of stuff that you can kind of get into.
We don't have the legal backing to navigate this storm that is potentially brewing here. So perhaps we'll say, yes, I see what you mean, Neil, because lots of tech geniuses try to get involved in education in different ways to varying degrees of success. So it'll be interesting to see how they go. What's really clear is that over the last 12 months, you've spent a lot of time exploring this field and getting to know this field, because the quality of your answers today absolutely blown my mind. Well, maybe it speaks to how little I've properly engaged with this, but I've learned a lot about how this actually might be. My skepticism is being eroded gradually with every response, and so it's really clear that you spend a lot of time thinking about this and how we can get the most of it. What are 3 things all teachers need to know about? You think, these are the 3 sort of products, maybe not even products, but types of product that you should be spending your time reading about now to get ahead of the curve, or even just to catch up?
Okay, I'll do 3 then a bonus one. So for the teacher, if you were to go sort of one tool to rule them all sort of thing, one place to go, because there must be hundreds of startups starting up sort of every day. But I think, you really can't go. It feels so weird saying this, but you really can't go wrong with Microsoft Bing as your kind of best free at the point of use generative AI tool for text and images. All you need is a Microsoft account, and you get, effectively, unlimited, conversations with this AI chatbot that you can use to create lesson plans, create quizzes, think of explanations, get thinking about analogies, generate interesting images that you might want to use in lessons, for example. The reason why Bing is particularly effective and useful is because Microsoft have plowed a lot of money into OpenAI, and so Bing is hooked into the ChatGPT-4 backend, so it's using the most up-to-date, certainly the most popular large language model to generate text and images, because it uses the recently updated Dolly 3 model to help with images as well. If you usually go through OpenAI themselves to get access to ChatGPT-4, I think it's something like 20 quid a month, I think. So, you can save yourself a lot of money straight away there by just doing it all through Bing. They're not quite the same. They're also going to, tweak and style it quite differently, but, effectively, and this is kind of an important point as well, kind of buried within this one, is that on any AI tool that comes up, or that you may come across, have a look and see what its large language model it's using to draw its data from, because if it's using the same backend, you can probably get the same answer using a free version. It may not look as pretty, but what you actually ask for, the content, is, I would say, 90-95% going to be the same. So if you haven't used any tools yet and you don't know where to start, or you've perhaps used ChatGPT 3.5, the free version, I would definitely say it's worth having a go at looking at Microsoft Bing, because, as I say, it's free and has the most up-to-date models that it draws upon. So that's definitely going to be high up there. Linked to this, so these are all nicely linked together. The kind of second thing is that there are two classes of sort of AI tools sort of out there right now. These are names that I've kind of given them. They're not ubiquitous by any sense of the imagination, but there's a sort of a closed AI tool. And what I mean by that is that the prompt is effectively invisible from you, and all you will be asked to do is input some information. So the stuff that Oak have put out recently, that's a good example of a closed AI tool, because all you do is ask for what year group, subject, any particular topic that you want, which you can input yourself. You press enter, and sort of, there you go. It kind of brings you back something. And there are, some advantages to that. One is that it's, quick and easy. The user doesn't have to learn how to do effective prompting. And as I say, it's quick and easy, but there are sort of some downsides to that, in that it doesn't sort of offer a serve and return type interface. So what you're given is what you get. You can't necessarily go back and tell the AI, oh, I don't really like question 4. Can you please change that to something else? Or, oh, I really wanted you to include the Normans started building castles quite quickly when they invaded in 1066. You've missed that. Can you please put that in your explanation? So you can't kind of do that. So it kind of really kind of limits you. It gets you there quickly, but sort of really limits you as to what you can do. The other type, which is the type of tool that Bing is, that ChatGPT is, that Dolly is what I kind of call open tools, in that you need to then provide that prompt. So you're in complete control as to what that prompt should be. And again, some advantages, disadvantages is that, well, you're not limited to the type of requests. So loads of these tools, the way they sort of, they'll usually say, oh, we have a lesson planner tool, a quiz creator tool, and you can have that for free. But if you want the assembly creator tool and you want the school improvement plan tool, then, it's, $6.99 a month, extra, whatever it is. If they're using ChatGPT-4, you don't need to worry about any of that because you can control the prompt yourself. So you can just ask for those things, because all of what those types of applications and tools are doing are just effectively keeping that prompt hidden from you. If you have good prompting engineering, you'll be able to get, probably 80% of what they give back to you. So that's why it's good, because you can prompt for anything that you want. You're only limited by what you yourself can think of. You have complete control over what that input is. A big bugbear of mine is that, and this goes on to my next thing that teachers should know, but because most of these things are trained on American data and sort of American, and they have, biases built into them, a lot of the output is going to be American English. So like my favorite ending of a prompt is always say the output must be in British English. Small, tiny thing, but it's going to save you a bit of time. Can't do that with the other ones unless behind the scenes they've also coded for that it must be in British English, but you will never know that until you've got a prompt, but put your information in and got some data out. It does allow for that kind of serve and return. So if I put a prompt in and it comes back with something that I don't like, I can quickly say, hey, I really liked this bit, but I'd really appreciate it if you included this. So you can kind of then sort of, narrow down what you want and really narrow your focus. It develops for the teacher expertise in prompting. So they actually understand the underlying features and structures of what, and their mental models of what this technology is and how it's going to work best for them. Something that doesn't necessarily happen with these closed tools. And let's say, going back to what we said, is this going to get rid of our thinking? It's definitely not, because the user in these open tools can use their own expertise of their subject phase, the curriculum, to guide these large language models to the output that kind of best suits their context. And so don't necessarily get that again with that closed sort of tools. Now, obviously, there are some disadvantages to this one as well. There is a big learning gap. You have to kind of learn how to prompt and what effective prompts are, and that takes time. And so obviously that's then going to perhaps impede how quickly you get started with this. If you don't feel successful straight away in it generating what you want, you might feel a bit disheartened and not motivated to give it a go. But I think the initial effort is worth the outcome by using, and again, full biased here, I have a newsletter that kind of tries to teach you how to do this open style use of AI tools, but I think in the long run, it's better for teachers to use that than some of these closed tools. And the kind of the third thing, again, we've kind of talked about this before, but is really important, is that it's not always right. So you may think that you've delivered something, got something back that's perfect. I think I saw something recently on Twitter about someone who wanted some descriptions of, I think it was like Gothic castles or something like that, and she wanted it from Dracula. So she wrote a prompt of to try and get that information back, and ChatGPT, whatever she used, brought back an excellent description of a Gothic castle in a relative style that I, as a novice in Gothic literature, would not be able to say, well, that's definitely not Bram Stoker. But one of the first comments was, hey, that's actually like not the description that's used in Dracula, right? And that was a surprise to her. So it's never right, because it's not connected to the internet necessarily. It is just a prediction device. It will be really, Well, they always say, like, as long as you say anything with enough confidence, like anyone will believe anything. Like, it is literally like that incarnate. It's so good at making you think that what it's producing is the right thing, and on the, it's trained on data, human created texts, and humans have biases that will have implications for the output of that data. And so you really kind of have to check and make sure that, one, it's accurate, and second of all, that, humans' natural cognitive biases aren't necessarily drawn out of that output as well, because you could get yourself in a bit of trouble, I think, if you don't check for that one as well, and you do end up producing text that may provide a certain interpretation that you believe something that or you've provided some data or some information to pupils that isn't necessarily correct, because it is the data was biased, so it's produced a biased output. And the bonus one, obviously, is that teachers should definitely sign up to Teacher Prompts newsletter, because that will definitely tell you everything that you need to know. I'm currently working on a beginner's guide to AI, and like Peps did with evidence snacks, if you refer, I think it's going to literally be like, if you refer 2 people to this, you'll get the guide. If you refer 6 people, you'll get the basic image guide as well. So that's my half-term job. So I'm hoping that will be done by, definitely not by tomorrow, but hopefully next week, once everyone's given it the okay. That will be available there as well for people to use.
I love the incentivized sort of thing. Yeah, and I remember speaking to Peps about him sort of just watching him with his chapter from his upcoming book and stuff like that. So I think that's a really interesting way to encourage engagement, and I'm looking forward. I mean, I'm excited about the potential for artificial intelligence just off the back of this, about an hour's conversation. So, whenever we finish up, I'm going away and I'm going to try and read as much about prompt engineering as I possibly can. What do you do for a job? Well, I'm a prompt engineer.
They say it's going to be a very highly valuable profession. I think that is probably, the jobs of tomorrow kind of brigade going a little bit too far, but it's definitely an interesting avenue.
Yeah. I mean, if there's one thing I've learned since starting my own business recently, is that if there's anything that could make your life easier, someone's got that corner of the market sewn up already. So if you want to save yourself some money and get exactly what you need, and then I think prompt engineering is going to be really, really important for getting the most of from artificial intelligence. What's your bold prediction for the next 12 months?
The outputs from these models are only going to be as good as the data that the model uses to learn from. And Oak National are, because all of their resources are open source, effectively, large language models can comb everything that Oak will create. And so that means that there is going to be, models that are trained specifically on education data, and specifically education data of the 2014 National Curriculum for England. And so as working in education in England, if you have models that are trained specifically on that data, that's going to be, particularly useful for teachers. And that's where whatever Oak do next could be really quite interesting over the next 12 months. So I think bold prediction there is to kind of keep an eye out on what Oak are doing, because they're going to produce something I think that could be really useful and valuable to teachers. I hope they open it up so it's not just a kind of a closed tool, but having it specifically trained on education data that's completely relevant to teachers in England is going to be quite a powerful thing. But they're going to open that data up to other models as well. So it may not just be Oak that has access to all of that. The biggest weakness that I found in generative image creation right now is that it is spectacularly poor at educational diagrams. So if I were to ask it to create show me a bar model of 4 times 6, or here's a word problem, show me a bar model that goes with that, can't do it. So I'm kind of confident in the next 12 months. Well, I feel not confident. I don't have no insider knowledge, but I feel like it's an easy win for them to, like, if you nail the educational diagram, you're going to make a lot of teachers very happy. If I can just say, consider the split attention effect and create a simple diagram of the water cycle aimed for pupils in, year 4, who are in the, studying the English curriculum. And I might say, it must include, evaporation, condensation, runoff, whatever else you want it to include, enter, and then it produces a useful graphic that takes into account the split attention effect. So it's not key in the corner, it's, labeled where it needs to be. And I don't have to worry about the copyright of that. That's going to be really powerful for teachers. Same way for, you and your maths journey. I'm sure if you could say, I want you to show them this model using algebra tiles or Cuisenaire rods, whatever it might be, and you could get generative AI to do that. That'd be really powerful. I've told Johnny, he needs to get in that market really, really quickly, make it happen, because no one's doing it right now. And kind of the next kind of prediction is that I do kind of think, I think more teachers are going to just keep on using it and find interesting ways to, make it work and make it work for them, make it useful, and hopefully cuts down a little bit on their teacher workload. And if I can play but a small part in that for what is for me, hours work on a weekend to put that newsletter together, I'll be a happy man.
Yeah, because at the minute, obviously, we made those movie posters. We know that it currently struggles with words, so there are some hurdles to overcome before diagrams and models are a realistic prospect. But imagine being able to sort of put in the prompt, and then you would have that representation ready for you. I think it would open up a lot of doors. So fingers crossed. I mean, obviously, no more marking, or sort of considering how they can get the most from it. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with because they've got a massive data set on which to train and stuff. I don't know. Your reaction seems to think that they haven't started exploring this. And have we just discussed that they should explore this, or I thought
no, they're doing some interesting stuff. No more marking. Obviously, Daisy is an intellectual powerhouse, and she's very good at getting rid of the rub, finding the bits of gold within all the nonsense that's out there right now. And they do good stuff.
Cool. Well, like I say, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think I've learned a lot. I am excited about the next 12 months. Really looking forward to seeing what happens. I'm definitely going to read more. I'm going to sort of pick your brain or offline for where are you going for your information firsthand, because at the minute I'm getting it from guys who are financially incentivized for this to be a success, so they're all very much in Palo Alto and the surrounding suburbs and have good skin in the game. They're not in education fields, but they're incentivized to make sure that technology continues to develop and stuff. And so it'd be interesting to find out, because I doubt research papers exist, because it's happening in real time, so to speak.
I'd be surprised if you go onto our lit maps. There's an area, there's a thing that I check every now and then about ChatGPT and engineer prompting and stuff like that I kind of put together. Ethan, I think it's Mullick. He's a pretty sensible AI engineer, prompter, researcher chap. He's worth a follow on Twitter if you don't. He's got a Substack too, which is worth a subscription to.
And he's a tech guru.
No, he's a teacher. He's a lecturer at university in America. So he's not in the tech. He's one of us, not a tech guy.
One of us. Independent adjudicator.
Independent adjudicator, absolutely.
Nice. Excellent. Well, I mean, to be continued, I think.
So yeah, see you another 12 months on my yacht.
Well, it could be some sort of robot hosting the show by then.
Well, yeah, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Yeah, that's the other avenue. Yeah, we haven't explored the vocalization stuff yet, have we?
No, that's for another time because I want to see how we can work that in.
This episode never really happened. It was all just an AI voice.
I mean, it struggles with my voice. It's got your voice down pat.
Yeah, it does it pretty well, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it thinks I'm American.
Well,
now, welcome to thinking deeply about primary education. Well, this doesn't sound like me at all.
no, that doesn't, to be fair.
All that's left to do then is say thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me, Kieran. Appreciate it.
And to everyone at home, until next time, thanks for listening.